Hey everybody, you can hear me now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now. I think we're 2 minutes over, so go ahead and get started. Thank you all for coming out. So I'll be presenting the integration we've built in ServiceNow between our ERP and a vendor Punchout. We also have created a asset ordering storefront that I'll also demo for you. So our agenda for today, I'll introduce myself. I'll go over the project context just to kind of give you an idea of what our goals were. I'll go over our solution and some of the challenges that we faced. And I'll give you a demo of both the Punchout as well as the storefront that we built inside of ServiceNow. And then we'll have about 10 minutes for questions. So about myself, my name's Scott Irvin. My official title is Production Service Specialist, but in reality, I'm a ServiceNow admin and developer. I work in IT service delivery until recently when we had a reorg, but we'll still call it IT service delivery for now. My company is Battelle. I've been working there for 3 years in IT service delivery. And for the past 2 years, I've been working specifically on the ServiceNow platform. So I started out that first year and bled into the second year in the SharePoint world. So any of you who are fond of that, I have lots of experience with that. That experience kind of led me into ServiceNow, and that's where it's been consuming most of my time with the backlog that we have. And I also have some experience with custom business applications that we've built in-house. My current projects are the asset management system. I'll show you most of that today. We're still working on finishing it up, but most of the integrations are done, and we're kind of moving on to the nice-to-have features. And then, of course, like any other developer, I'm sure spend a lot of time on your company's ServiceNow backlog. So about my company, Battelle, we're based in Columbus, Ohio. We are a research and development contractor. We work primarily with the government, but we do have about 10% of our business in the commercial space. Our market focus, we do everything from national security to medical devices. So we've developed things like the Xerox machine, quite a while ago, right? But we had a big piece of that. We were involved in the Manhattan Project. And then modern day, we do things like armored vehicles, as well as what I always like to tell everybody is the Neurolife technology that we work with, which is a brain-computer interface. It's pretty cool. It allows paraplegics to basically control their own arms again. Our first patient, we're still working with him, but he's been using it for about 3 years while we've been developing it. It started out where he could just barely twitch his hand, and recently I saw a video of him able to pick up a cup of coffee and drink it, so that's pretty cool. Some company-wide initiatives, cost efficiency, which I'm sure you all are you can relate to that. We also have initiatives to modernize our business systems because a lot of them are from back 2010 and before, so we're trying to get up to date using standards and things that allow people to use these business applications on their phone on the go. We're also trying to define and focus on key markets because in the early 2000s, we kind of became very broad, and since then, we've tried to consolidate into those key markets that we have a right to win. All right, so what you'll learn today, or what I'd like you to learn today, is how to leverage out-of-the-box asset management, or whatever module you're focused on in your development. And then how to extend that functionality with custom code. And then also, the big part of this is integrating with other systems using web services. So a little bit of context about why we started this project. So before this, we used HP. We ordered directly from HP, and they had a tool that we used that was for both the storefront as well as asset management. Those were both coming to end of life, and HP said, we're not doing a new version of them. And actually, it wasn't a great asset management system since no one used it. So yeah, we'll get to a couple of problems that caused a little bit later. So the old purchasing process that was tied in with that HP storefront, it actually didn't meet our standard procurement process. Since it was put in place either before our ERP or about during the same time, we didn't send orders through the ERP. So rather than all of those standards, those standards of how anything else gets procured, laptops and desktops were a lot different. They were sent directly to HP, and so we didn't have as much control over, like the project managers, for example. They typically can approve orders over X amount. They didn't have those controls, so that caused some issues. Not to mention how bad that looks in an audit if we had to explain that. So we also had demands to offer multiple OEMs. So you could imagine that HP didn't really want to buy Dells for us. So by onboarding a value-added reseller, we could order everything through a single reseller, but offer Apple and Dell and, of course, HP still all through the same reseller. So that was one of the reasons we wanted to move to a value-added reseller. There's a couple others, some benefits to how well we could integrate with HP versus them. So they offered some other extra selling points. So why did we choose ServiceNow for this? So the big push was that was the single place for all IT-related requests. We had already implemented software ordering through ServiceNow, so we decided to implement hardware ordering through ServiceNow as well, because that kind of ties hand in hand. Out of the box, you get that user and mobile friendly. We've implemented Service Portal, and you'll see that the solution is built on top of Service Portal. So kind of out of the box, and it's easy to build user and mobile friendly interfaces. So that's one of the things that we're working with an instance of PeopleSoft that's back from 2010 or 2011, and the end user interface is pretty miserable. So we wanted to allow users a friendly interface to order their PCs. We're already using the CMDB, so we wanted a single source of truth. It was getting a little confusing because on the off chance that somebody did go in and update their asset information through the asset management system provided by HP, there was no integration to ServiceNow, so the assigned to would be out of date in ServiceNow. Those kind of things can lead to questions, and so it was kind of natural to use ServiceNow as asset management with the CMDB in ServiceNow. And of course, we wanted to leverage all the out-of-the-box features. You get a lot of great things in asset management. Those include procurement, which unfortunately we couldn't use, but initially planned on using it. You get things like if you update the asset, it updates the CMDB where you want it to. So lots of great out-of-the-box features that we wanted to take advantage of. So some of the challenges we had. So mapping and moving the data from the old system to ServiceNow. So this mostly wasn't a problem, but there were some issues. So for example, location was stored as just plain text in the old asset management system. When we try to migrate that, you need to be able to look that up and find the corresponding location. And just in general, a lot of this data was old. So when we moved it over to ServiceNow, and we still are working on this, is the data cleansing. It's pretty difficult to get the up-to-date information. We're working on inventorying all of our assets, and we'll continue to work on that going forward. So we had some challenges with our integration points. So we had to work with our vendors. So that included our value-added reseller as well as our disposal vendor. So we needed to work with those vendors to make sure that we were able to get the data how we wanted it. And so that even included with our value-added reseller, asking them to make some additional services to expose some of the data for us. Another challenge with the integration points is since we implemented software first, we actually implemented a PeopleSoft integration with that. That's how we send requisitions to PeopleSoft. And so we wanted to, PeopleSoft developers are kind of in short supply, so we wanted to just extend that rather than changing it at all. And then throughout the project, this has been going on for about 1.5 years now, so, and it's not 1.5 years worth of work. The reason it's been going on so long is we keep changing requirements. So initially, the plan was to do the ordering outside of ServiceNow, and we'd gotten pretty far down that path, and we'd made some architectural decisions inside of ServiceNow that we haven't even gone back to change because we were so far along before somebody said, hey, we order software in ServiceNow, wouldn't it be great to order hardware there too? So we ended up changing probably 1/2 year into the project to decide to order the assets inside of ServiceNow as well. We also, more recently, have decided to shift asset ownership into IT. So rather than the business lines owning the assets, IT will. So that changes the ordering process. We're going to control what they order. We're also planning on ordering some things in bulk. So we're not really sure where that's going to lead. If we're just going to buy a bunch of stock and let the users pull whatever available, or if eventually we'll allow the users to request their systems again. End user interface plans continue to change. That's a lot related to the ownership shifting to IT. And then, of course, budgeting and project ownership changes. So we've had one of those, and we kind of ran over the budget, the initial budget, and with the project ownership changing, it is hard to get a sufficient budget to continue making those changes. Real quick, just so everybody knows what a Punchout is, you might since you've come to this session, but just in case, it's based on CXML, which is just a protocol for Punchout. It's based on XML, and it's pretty much just XML with a schema applied. It was specifically created for communication between procurement applications and suppliers. So if you integrate it all with suppliers, you probably use CXML and Punchout. It's kind of the standard. So how a Punchout works is basically the procurement application will request a session with the supplier. The supplier will provide that session. The user interacts with the actual supplier site rather than your site. And then once they're done, they've decided what they're going to order. That information is sent back from the supplier site to the procurement application. So in this case, we are using the punch-out between our value-added reseller and ServiceNow. So ServiceNow is the procurement application in this case. All right, so a big diagram of the integration. So I have a laser pointer, there we go. So it's kind of hard to see from here too. But anyway, so the hardware vendor, this is our value-added reseller I've been talking about. Down here we have the ServiceNow instance, the PeopleSoft instance, and then finally, I can't point to it, there we go, the disposal vendor on the far right. So the first thing that we run is a daily job to pull all of the standards and bundles from the vendor site into ServiceNow. So that's just a REST request that happens every morning, and it is retrieving all of those standards and bundles that we tell the value-added reseller to make available. So when we get that information, it includes things like price, description, make, model, things you need to have to submit an order to our VAR. Next up is, so these two boxes right here are the Punchout. So it's an on-demand CXML request for a token and a URL for the Punchout. So what happens is when the user goes in to the catalog item, which is the Punchout catalog item, we are going to get their credentials, so things like their email address and their name. We send that over to our vendor, who will create a user account if they haven't already created one for that email address. And then they will initiate a session and send us a URL. Once we have that URL, we will open a separate tab in the user's browser. It's basically maintained with the session. We will navigate to that URL. So the user will be looking at the vendor's site and their catalog, and they'll be able to select what laptop or assets they want. Once they check out on the vendor's site, that information is sent via CXML post back to the ServiceNow. We've created a custom processor, which they send that information back to. That processor will create rec lines in ServiceNow and associate it to that request. We have a listener on the catalog item that waits until we get that response, and as soon as we get that response, it's going to close that tab that it's opened. So we get that information back, they fill out a couple more fields, and then over here, once they submit the RITM and get the approvals they need, we have a SOAP call to PeopleSoft that we send that information to create a requisition. Once we're inside of PeopleSoft, we have additional approvers that might happen, but eventually it goes through that standard procurement process and creates a PO that's submitted to our vendor. Once our vendor has that order, they're going to fulfill the order, and as soon as they ship it out the door, they send us a advanced shipping notice via SOAP. So this was one of the decisions we made early on before we knew we were going to be doing ordering inside of ServiceNow. So rather than the logical place to be creating assets where we, or sorry, not there, but actually here, this would probably be the logical place to create the assets because we've ordered them, we know we're going to get them. So the user can see, okay, it's the request has been sent to the vendor. Yes, sir. We do have the serial, or sorry, We wouldn't have a serial number. We would create a kind of a shell. Yep, yep. So yeah, that would probably be the logical place. But since we were planning on doing this outside of the procurement outside of ServiceNow, we actually create it when they send that advanced shipping notice. And so we do have, using that advanced shipping notice, we do have the serial number and those kind of things. So it probably would have been a better idea to create it when we send that requisition, and then once we get the advanced shipping notice, we could populate the additional information. But we don't, so that's a future enhancement maybe. So anyhow, once we get that ASN, we create the asset. It's back in ServiceNow. It's going to go through the asset lifecycle. And then at the very, very end, we'll retire that asset. And the disposal vendor, once they get it and they've confirmed that it's disposed, actually sends us an email with an Excel attachment. Not ideal. But so what we've done with that is we use a inbound action rule to take that attachment, create a data source with it, and then we transform it. And we set all of the assets to disposed, and we add a little comment that says, here's the attachment that says that this should be disposed. So kind of this is an easy way to track the disposal. So next up, we'll have a quick demo. And I wasn't brave enough to do it live because of if anybody's had any Wi-Fi issues, I'm right there with you. So it's just a video. So here we are in our service portal, and these are just the hardware, These are the hardware requests that we have available. This is our dev system, so some of the stuff is kind of in flight still. But when the user goes in, they will just select the Punchout request. And what you might have noticed there was a flash of the catalog item, and then it brings up the vendors page. And so what you're not seeing here is the tabs I have open. So that just opened a second tab, and it is the user's session. Once they're in the vendor's site, they'll be able to shop for any bundles or components that they want. You'll notice this is the test environment for our reseller, so there are some things that don't really look quite right. But they are able to select bundles and add them to their cart. So I think in the demo, I select a couple of them. Once they've selected everything they want, they can go to their cart. And so since we selected bundles, those bundles are broken out into individual line items here. So they're able to review what line items they've selected. They can remove change any quantities that they want while they're here. Then they'll be able to check out. This is just a quick review page, and they'll be able to submit the cart from here. What this is doing is our vendor is sending a request back to ServiceNow, and as soon as ServiceNow got it, we closed the tab. And if you scroll to the bottom of the request item we have open, you can see all of those line items that we've received for that order. They are able to modify individual line items if they'd like. But if they're happy with everything they have, they can just fill out a couple questions. This next set of questions, we actually validate the project and activity against our ERP system. That's a live request that we send through our mid server. But once that's validated, it'll switch back from read-only to editable again. They can finish filling out the form. You see that we've defaulted some of the information. So if they select a project and activity, we apply it to each line item. They're able to submit that order, and that just submits a request item in ServiceNow. We still haven't sent anything to our ERP yet. You can open that request item. I actually got open it in the platform just because the related lists are a little bit easier to see there. So you can see this is just a normal request item. The only difference is at the beginning of the workflow, we've associated each of those line items to the request item. So you can see we have a related list of rec line items now. We also have an approval, so I'm going to go ahead and approve that. And as soon as I approve that, I'm going to scroll back up to the top because we get some live updates from our ERP system since that's sent it over. You can see that the stage has changed now, and in a second, the state will change as soon as we get that staged into our ERP. And that's where I'm going to cut the demo, because from there, we're going to do the standard procurement process. So I'll stop that there. So that is our Punchout, which we currently use in production. This next catalog item is actually the Storefront that we've built that we had planned to expose to end users. At this point, we're not sure if we're going to end up doing that or not, just based on the ordering changes that we've had. But, so I'll go ahead and run you through this demo. So the user will just select the, this was the same one. All right, let me proceed. There we go. So this is the catalog that we imported. We import daily from that REST service. So the user is just going to go into I have it called wireframe still right now. But they're able to view all of the bundles that they have, and they're able to see some details about it. So that includes price and whatever they send over in a long description field. They're also able to see any standards, and we have that broken down into different categories for them. But they're able to add just a couple bundles to the cart. And I think I'll add one more here. So they're able to add those items. There's a couple answers that apply to each line item, and they are able to default those down using that functionality. They're also able to review each of the line items that make up that bundle. So if they already have a mouse, they could remove the mouse if they'd like. If they'd like 2 monitors, they can change the quantity to 2, those kind of things. Once they're happy with the order, they'll proceed to answer some catalog item questions. And I'm going to pause right there, hopefully. Yeah. Great. So I wanted to highlight this real quick because this is how, or this field right here, this is actually the JSON for the cart object that we just covered in the previous page. So we're going to use that, and we're going to parse it out using a business rule once they submit their order, so that we're able to transform that cart that they have into individual rec line items. So you can see this object's pretty large, just standard JSON though. And so I've submitted that order, and I'll go ahead and review it. I'm going to do the same thing and open it in the platform. And when we scroll down, we see that JSON again. And we'll also see all of those items broken out into individual rec line items. So from there, we'd just do the same thing. We'd approve it, and it would create a requisition in our PeopleSoft instance. All right, so what are our next steps? So we need to make some decisions on our UI. So are we going to expose it to customers or not? So that will have a big effect on whether we use that catalog or not. We have some data cleanup efforts to do. We need to inventory our assets and make sure that we have all that data up to date. One of the things that we're doing to assist in that is we've made a catalog item that you're able to request changes to your asset, and we have an approval workflow that will go to the asset owner for that. So they're able to say, oh yeah, that's right, you do own that asset, or no, that's actually Jeff's asset. And then, of course, you always have the nice-to-have features, which may or may not make it inside the project. So some top takeaways. ServiceNow provides a great foundation for asset management. We really didn't have to do much to the actual asset management module. Most of it was just getting the data into it. From there, it provides most of the things you need out of the box. The next one is ServiceNow is very capable of integrating with other systems. I loved talking to vendors, and they would say, well, can you do this? And sometimes the answer was, well, of course we can do it. It's not as easy as it is for some other things, but of course we can do it. But we were able to negotiate with them and try to get it mostly easy for us. And then finally, the service portal allows you to create responsive and user-friendly UI. So that's a big one. It was easy for us to pull those items in, display them to the user, and make it user-friendly right out of the box with the service portal. All right, and that's it, and I'll open it up to questions. A little bit early, so I think we have about 15 minutes for questions. Right here. Yep. Oh, wait for a mic for a second here.
Hi, sorry, thank you. That flow that you had up there,
Yeah.
make sure I was following it correctly. So, are you guys actually placing the order with the vendor before the request gets approved?
Placing the order with the
From
vendor.
what I could follow with it, so you get the advanced shipping notice and everything, and then it says after RITM approvals, who's approving that RITM?
This approval right here. So after the approval, so this is the 1/1 approval. And then once we get inside of PeopleSoft, so we do actually create a requisition inside of PeopleSoft. And then once we're inside of PeopleSoft, that requisition could be approved by a project manager if we've broken a threshold that they've set. Or if it's a capital purchase, it also will have to be approved by somebody inside of procurement. But then once we've gotten all of those approvals, then we send it to the vendor as a PO.
Okay, so does that advanced shipping notice, does that happen after the PO submission?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, I should have probably broken this down to swim lanes.
No, that's
but
fine. I just wanted to make sure, because I think we started talking about this first, so I got a little thrown off. So when you guys are, you showed us the Punchout where they go into the vendor site, and then for the wireframe ones and I'm assuming your standard items where you're pulling the bundles into ServiceNow to display them there. Are you guys doing any entitlements based on what hardware a user can request? And if so, how is that being handled on the vendor site?
So the answer is no, we aren't doing any entitlements. So we leave that to the 1/1 approver.
What's that term? Sorry.
So the manager of the person that submitted the request.
Calling it 1/1?
1/1?
1/1.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a new one for me.
Great.
I'm sorry. So does that mean that your departments are paying for all the hardware? There's no centralized budgeting then?
What's that?
I said you guys aren't concerned with the entitlements because the approvers, the ones that are paying for it, their department?
Right, yep.
There's no centralized hardware budget. It's
right.
all...
So actually the person that pays for it, and maybe why we don't care about entitlements, is the project manager that approves it in PeopleSoft. So it's really what we're using ServiceNow for. It's not the entitlements, it's just a requisition creation tool in this case.
You had two demos there. You did one was a punch out, and then the other one was populate the catalog within ServiceNow. So is the reason you did both is prefer one over the other?
Yeah, so the original plan was that the Punchout was going to be phase one. The user experience for that, if you noticed, the user basically selected the items they wanted, and then they would review the items they wanted, and then they would submit it, and then they would go back to ServiceNow, and they would have to fill out some more questions, and then review again and submit it. So it's not a great user experience. So the plan was that phase two was going to be the catalog in ServiceNow, where we expose all of those standards and bundles to the end user. They're able to select the ones they want, review it on a screen, answer those questions, and then just submit it right away. So the user experience, I think, was the key.
When you pull the catalog in, though, then don't you have to request for every one of those items in ServiceNow then?
What's that?
You pull the catalog in to populate ServiceNow from the vendor, then don't you have to build a request for each one of those?
No. So what you were looking at was actually a single request item in ServiceNow. We pull over the standards and bundles and put them into tables, and then we use a widget inside of that catalog item to dynamically display the bundles and standards that we currently have in those tables.
Okay, so one of the things, so in your punch out, I noticed that when you got to the checkout, it didn't present you with actually put the financials in to pay for it. Is that something that's part of the CXML session that he knows not to ask you for payment?
Yeah, so basically the reason why we had that in the punch-out and not in the the catalog in ServiceNow was with IT absorbing all assets, asset ownership, they'll all be defaulted to a project and activity, one project and activity in the future.
But how did the vendor know not to? If you were just going to a vendor site, it would normally be a screen to pay, put your payment information in, but it didn't present that. It went right back to you, the data right back at the ServiceNow instead of presenting you with your credit card information.
Was that on? Are you talking about on the punch out or on?
Punch out, yeah. When you were in checkout at a punch out, you went to your cart to check out, but it didn't ask you to put payment information in.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, that's not the step where we decide payment, how we're going to use the payment. So basically, we punch out to the hardware vendor. They select things there. We send back what they selected, and then in ServiceNow, we decide what project and activity we're going to pay for those items with. Oh, right. Yeah. So that was just something. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, that was something that we asked our vendor to change, but since they service multiple people, they said they couldn't change that. Yeah.
With your RITM approval SOAP request that goes back to PeopleSoft, is that really just a message into PeopleSoft that's telling somebody to review the RITM and then create a PR and go through that process, or does it actually populate a PR?
Yeah, so it actually is, so that request will actually send the requester, the project and activity, or sorry, that's not right. The requester, some other information about the requester, and then it will send each requisition line over to PeopleSoft. They were able to expose a service for us that just takes all that information and creates the requisition from there. Yep.
So generally the idea behind doing a punch out is you don't want to be in the business of maintaining catalog for all these companies, right? So let's say Dell or Apple, they keep on changing and bringing new hardware models. Don't want to keep on creating items for them, deactivate them, and try to figure it out what are all the permutation combination of the bundles. So I see there a hardware vendor there. So which is the vendor? Is it directly you're punching out to Dell, Apple, or you have an in-between reseller who then go and punch out to, not punch out, but have a relationship with a Dell or a HP or a Apple?
So,
Do this every. I'm a reseller. So a customer would set up a punch out with us to our catalog, and the back end resell Dell, Lenovo, Microsoft, whatever relationships with. The customer, come to our punch out catalog, select items, create a cart, and submit. So you don't buy. So you're not putting information or it's just a requisition. And so you're sending that requisition back to the customer, in this case to ServiceNow. And on our back end, purchasing our vendors or whoever supplies the actual word software on our behalf, the distribution.
Hi, can you walk us through an asset perspective when the asset gets created, gets populated with certain attributes, and then when does it get assigned to in the map that you?
Yep. So right here, when the advanced shipping notice is sent, that's when we actually create the record. We populate that with, they'll send us the serial number, the asset tag, make, model, manufacturer, all that good stuff that we need. So that's actually going to create the asset. When we create the asset, we have some logic in ServiceNow that associates that asset to an open rhythm. So basically, we're looking for so there's a model number, or not model number, it's a item number that our vendor uses. So when they send us the information back from the punch out, we get that ID and we store it against the rhythm. So we know rhythm 123 is looking for item 456. So when we get an advanced shipping notice that has item 456 in it, we look for a rhythm that is waiting for item 456. So when we tie those together, then we associate the other information to the asset, such as assigned to, or it's actually reserved for in that moment of time. So they're reserved for, and there's a couple other fields like how used. So we want to know if it's for lab equipment or things like that. But we're able to pull information from the rhythm at that point and push it into the asset.
Hi again.
Hey.
So you guys, I'm sorry, where did you say you guys were located?
What's that?
Where are you guys located?
Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, and do you guys have any other offices or
Yes. Yes,
So-
we have lots of regional offices. Yep.
regional? And are you guys global?
We are global, but we are not ordering the assets for other countries.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have done a lot of work, and I think it's great what you guys are doing with, the integrations that you've built with the vendor and everything. But is it just one vendor that you guys are doing that with today?
Yes. So this is for hardware assets specifically.
Yeah.
And since we've taken on a value-added reseller, we're ordering all hardware assets through them.
Okay.
We did keep in mind that we might order other IT or even other things through Punchout. So we've made it so we're able to apply the same logic to other Punchouts, but there would be additional dev work there.
And that's part of the reason I was asking about entitlements earlier, because we have locations in 32 different countries, and they can't always buy from the same VARs or vendors. So I was just wondering, how do you, when your users, if you want to have one single portal for your users across the globe and have one solid employee experience, when they go into order, how do you make sure they're ordering it from the right place? So, since we're not controlling permissions, because for them it's difficult to know what they actually need to order.
Yeah, so basically, we don't have very many regional offices, and they're pretty small, the ones we have. So if they need a hardware asset, they just go through standard procurement process. So our procurement team is able to leverage our value-added resellers deals and things like that, and ship internationally. Yep. Yep. Anything else? Great. Thank you all very much for coming out, and enjoy your night.